Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv, Wolok, my partner in crime, Vasili, Gianarakos. Welcome back for another episode, my friend. How are you?
Doing well, Yariv. It's been a pretty great week in terms of Flyers news, things like that, just with the draft going on in free agency. The Flyers, if you look at it, they had a really great draft, probably one of their best in the last, 5 years, if you look back at the picks and things like that. I personally got to go to the draft and experience that, so that was a great opportunity and was awesome to get out there and ask some questions and things like that. And we're here basically for a huge draft episode, and we have a great guest lined up to break it all down for us. So it's going to be a fun one. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, I'm doing well, buddy. Yeah, good breakdown. And obviously, you've had a ton of requests, by the way, Steve. And I think I kind of told you this already, but the draft man himself, the draft analyst, Steve Kournianos, welcome back for another episode, my friend. How are you?
This is great. Is this year three? Is this the third time?
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is
So
the third
this is
year.
basically like what we would call a battle rhythm event. Like if you're a new subscriber or you're just finding out about the podcast, like we're gonna do this every year until
Yeah,
we stop doing it. So
yeah.
yeah, it's great to be back.
I love it. And I'm going to keep asking you to do it all the time. So that's for
Sure.
sure. So before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to our listeners. Please like, subscribe, share, hit the bell, hit the hit the subscribe button already, but do everything. Just hit the bell, follow us, rate us on everything. Everything you guys have done has been immensely helpful. And we really, really appreciate it. Our numbers are definitely up and we notice the engagement. So thank you all so much. And also shout out to Jim Steaks on 4th and South. They're still not open, but again, they are nearing opening. So shout out to Jim Steaks on 4th and South. Go get yourself a cheesesteak. All right, let's get into the fun stuff. Steve, I'll be honest with you, man. I kind of been thinking about this a lot. Obviously, this episode, like you roll back. I love that you just said that we do this annually, because if you think about like our conversations, we were talking about Michkov a
Yeah.
long time. Like
A lot.
there was nothing, like there was no conversation that we had about this draft that did not include Michkov being a superior player, a high-end player, a guy who should be up there in the conversation with at least challenging Bedard in what he was doing. And
Yeah.
here we go. Like, let's get right into the draft. The Philadelphia Flyers have drafted Matvei Michkov at number 7, somehow fall to us in a scenario where, I'll be honest, I really didn't believe it until the name was said out loud. Like, I thought at
Yeah.
the very last second something would happen. They would take Leonard. But they got Matvei Michkov. We'll go to you, Steve, just to open it up. I've already talked about Michkov quite a bit, and so is Vasili. We'll save our opinions for after, but give it to us. What do we just get? Because we're all immensely, immensely excited.
I mean, you could again, I could because remember they're kids, so you could like may have drafted, and I say you like Flyers Nation, Flyers fans, like your team could have drafted like a potential top goal scorer in the NHL, and that how far that extends. Does that extend over like the course of a full career in Philadelphia? Is he going to be like a Bobby Ryan, where he's going to go to like different teams, or like Danny Heatley, go to different teams and succeed there? And but really, like the bottom line with Michkov, forget about all the other stuff that he can do, the passing, his hockey IQ, like the effort that he gives. His thing is goal scoring. That's what he does best. And so, like in a way, you could like a player like Michkov. I don't think you really have to tell him anything. I think you just have to like put him on the ice, explain to him like little things here and there. But his job is to get open and score goals, and he's done that better than any prospect I've ever seen since I've been covering this draft, the draft and back in like 2015. So you're talking about McDavid and Austin Matthews and whatever. Like no one has been as prolific a goal scorer. No one has made it look as easy since he was like 15 as Michkov. So you're looking at like if things work out, this is one thing you can do. If you take his numbers in tournaments and take his numbers in junior hockey and take his numbers in the KHL and take his numbers in the VHL, where he's playing against adults, he's checked every block. He's played against men. He's played against like, mid 20 somethings. He's played against kids his own age. And he's always been the dominant player there. He's always been the dominant goal scorer, the top line guy. The few games he had with Ska, all right, Ska's a freaking powerhouse. I'm not going to give this kid. But even when he did play a few games with Ska last year, he still got in action and was having like 6-7 shots a game in some cases. So again, just to like sum it all up, like what you could be seeing is the beginning of the career of the greatest goal scorer in Flyers history. That's a realistic a result or outcome of drafting Matvei Michkov. Obviously, expectations are going to be sky high, even though he still was a 7th overall pick, because he's still Michkov, and people like myself are saying, nope, this guy's right there with Bedard. He should have been 1A. He should have never been downranked. So there's going to be pressure there, and we'll see how that turns out. But the example I've used in the past before, I've used guys like Bure, Kuznetsov, Tarasenko, Malkin. They come 1, 2, 3 years after being drafted, and it's no problem. But the one I use for Flyers fans is Peter Forsberg. Even though Forsberg didn't make his debut in the NHL, for Flyers fans, the buildup for Forsberg, like when he was drafted by the Flyers in '91, we knew what he did at the junior tournaments, how he was it was a ridiculous scoring pace, but it's what Forsberg did in 91, 92, 92, 93, and 93, 94 that really got people excited. And he wasn't even doing it in the NHL. He was doing it in Sweden. So, like, Quebec fans were like, oh, well, we're going to draft him. We got to wait. Like, it was an excitement. It was like a Kaprizov. It was a steady build. And when he landed in 94, 95, just like Kaprizov a couple of years ago, he was an instant hit. So the Michkov that you'll get whenever he does show up in Philadelphia, he's going to be tempered in basically KHL steel, if you want to call it that. Like he's going to be well seasoned. He's going to have at least 3 full seasons in the KHL, make it 4 if you want to count what he just did this last 22-23. So it's going to work out. It's just the buildup is going to be a lot of anticipation. People are going to be anxious, but he's a great goal scorer. And every time he scores in Russia, every time he scores a goal in the KHL, you might start hearing, well, what's David Reinbacher doing now? What's so-and-so doing? And that was the reason why I said these GMs are idiots for passing on him, because if you draft him, no one's going to say you're an idiot for drafting this guy because he deserved to be drafted that high. But when you draft a defenseman ahead of him, like Arizona and Montreal did, now you're in the oh, well, defensemen take long to hit. Well, look at what this guy Michkov is doing in Russia. He's scoring 35, 40 goals, which no one really does there. So it's a great spot for the Flyers to be in too, because they've been building their prospect pool for the last few years. The fans are kind of tired of the rebuild. They want to see change. We saw a little bit of it last year. But Michkov, if things work out, this kid could be showing up when the Flyers are a playoff team. And then you're looking at, the beginning of what could be a historic career.
Yeah. So you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, of course. For Michkov, obviously, I talked about it a lot. You obviously mentioned the same, Yariv. I think we were kind of had the same thoughts that if Michkov falls to the Flyers at 7, it's no doubt about it, you have to select him. And I think Danny Briere and his staff, they make the right move by doing that and making that selection. And I got to ask him a question at the draft just about if Michkov was the best player on their board at that time at number 7. He's undoubtedly said yes, he was. And if they knew that he was going to be there and other teams, weren't going to pass up on him, that it would have made things a lot easier for them and for the staff, right? So I think even Briere is probably surprised, and probably some GMs are surprised that Michkov actually got passed up on, because if you go back to a year ago, we talked to you, Steve, you undoubtedly told us, right, that he's a number 2, 1A potentially to Bedard in this draft. And I mean, if you look at his skill and just what he's done this season, playing in the KHL with HC Sochi there, 20 points in 27 games amongst men. And I believe he also had a higher points per game at the same age in his draft year than Ovechkin, Malkin, Tarasenko, Kaprizov, Kucherov, Kuznetsov, Buchnevich.
Yeah.
And that's a 0.67 points per game. Like, it just shows how talented.
Considerably higher.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It just shows how talented that this kid is, right? Like, so for teams to pass up on him at the spot that he was at, and the fact that they had, a chance to select him, it's puzzling to me. But obviously for the Flyers, it's a home run, and I mean, they're taking a swing on a high end offensive talent, so it's good for the Flyers to do that. Where I mean, maybe past regimes, I don't know if they would have passed on him, but they might have maybe gone for a safer pick, just based off all the geopolitical things happening. But just to like lay it out for you, right? He had 0.67 points per game as compared to Tarasenko's 0.57, Panarin 0.45, Kaprizov 0.26 in his draft year, Kuznetsov 0.23, and Kucherov 0.22. So it just shows, I mean, how talented he is. And one thing too that I thought was interesting, at least when I watched clips and highlights of him, is his shot and the release of his shot is so good, and he beats goalies and deceives them from so many different places on the ice. And I just think in today's NHL, that's such a huge thing in terms of scoring goals. If you look at all the best shooters, like Austin Matthews, like a Kaprizov, like some of the elite shooters in the league, they are doing that on a regular basis, disguising their shot, like a Jason Robertson, right? So there's a lot in terms of that. And even Michkov said himself that that's something, when I got to ask him about the deception with his shot, he said himself that that's something that he really works on in his game and something that he tries to work on, year by year to improve. So I think just with the pick in general, the Flyers, you can't really go wrong with getting him at number 7, when in my eyes, I think he probably should have been, a number 2 overall pick. He's easily the most second talented player behind Bedard, I think, when you look at all these factors. And even you got to look at this too, right? He was tournament MVP at the under 18s in 2021, where Bedard was there and he outscored him there. He led the Gretzky Hlinka Cup in scoring in 2021 as well. So all that together, I think the Flyers are in really good shape with Michkov, right?
Exactly. And that's been my thing the whole time, is like Michkov already proved himself at that level when he was draft -2. So it wasn't even his draft year. And he was literally destroying kids who were two years older than he was at these tournaments.
It's insane, exactly.
And the one thing that really nobody kind of talked about, except in like as a passing comment, was that Michkov had this historic season, and it was a historic season because, Vasili, you just did all the homework and you read off all the names, okay? Was that he had a knee injury in the preseason, that he had a horrible knee-on-knee hit from Alexei Yemelin. You remember him?
Yeah, I remember that. I watched that hit, yep.
Yeah, so it was a knee-on-knee hit. It was a dirty hit. It wasn't like, incidental contact. And the kid was in pain. He's the youngest kid in the freaking league. He a 30-plus-year-old NHL veteran, a big physical.
Yeah, he's a big guy. Exactly.
Nailed him, and within a month, he was back, and he goes to the VHL, which is an adult league, and he was averaging almost a goal a game, which no one does. No one goes to the VHL in their draft year and averages a goal a game. Like, no one does that. And so it was like weird to me. Like, dude, if this happened to Bedard, and of course Bedard did great at the World Juniors, but you would think that he pulled what Gretzky and Lemieux did at the '87 Canada Cup. Like, it was like, this is Connor Bedard's coming out party. He cemented it. Like, no, he kind of cemented it well before that. But what's the difference between what Bedard did at the World Juniors over a 7-game sample with playing teams like whatever, and Michkov playing in a league like the KHL and scoring at the rate that he did? And let's be honest here, if Michkov plays at the U20 World Juniors, he's probably going to score a goal a game as well. Yeah. So it was just weird hearing like all the negativity surrounding the poor kid when, he battled back from a serious lower body injury. I don't know if it was a Charlie horse, if it was a knee injury. But like I said, I'm not going to really say a whole lot. I'm going to wait to see what Michkov is 25. I could be patient. I could wait 8 years or 7 years. I'm going to wait to see what he's at 25. And even if he's a Flyer and he's beating up my team, I think I'm going to just have like a 3-hour podcast where I'm just going to unleash on everybody because this should have never happened. Like you said, Vasili, he should have been drafted higher. It was weird why teams passed on him.
Just the Russian factor, it seems to me, and the risk associated, but it doesn't even look like there's really much risk because Scott's even said that, once his contract's up with us, we are going to let him go over, right? So
everything was debunked. Okay. Yeah. What was the other narrative? The narrative was that
he didn't want to come
back. Well, before that, it was, we can't scout plays in Russia. You can only do a video. We don't do. And it's like,
teams have their own scouts in Russia. So,
but here's the thing. So I said, you know what? I'll believe it. I don't really believe it, but I'll believe it if you tell me that you're having a tough time scouting him. And then Buffalo has their press conference And Jerry Fortin the scouting director is asked, did you have a tough time? You guys are drafting a lot of Russians lately. Did you have a tough time scouting them? And you know what he said? He said the opposite. He's like, actually, we've had it easier scouting Russian kids and getting their information than getting kids from North America. He goes, everything varies from player to player, team to team. Some teams, whether they're in the KHL or the SHL or the NLA or the freaking USHL, the coach or the owner of the team might be like, no, like limited interaction, like I don't want the kids, blah blah blah. So that narrative was debunked. So the fact that we had all these, and then what was his character issues? He's not. How is he going to go to the draft? How could he escape Russia? The kid's in freaking. The minute people said that, he's in Dubai taking pictures on the beach. It was weird, like all this, negativity surrounding him. Like we get it, you didn't like him, but
there's a Hollywood narrative around Russia. Like people have this like idea that like you got to smuggle people out of the country and that, you're going to be shot if you go in there and you're going to be arrested. And it's like, I just don't, I think people have kind of lost their mind a little bit, and I can't be happier with what happened because this is my favorite part, Steve. We talked about this 12 months ago.
Yeah.
You told us this was going to happen, by the way. So I was praying that people were dumb enough for this, to be honest with you, because it's insanity. So I want to point something out that I thought about recently, just because Michkov, which people don't want to think about. I love that you brought up the injury as well, but he's probably had maybe the worst year of his life, right?
Yeah.
He hasn't been able to play in the tournament where he was supposed to make a name for himself. He's banned from all national tournaments at this point, so the world can't find out about him. He has a serious injury at some point. His father ends up somehow murdered or dead, or I'm not sure. Yeah. He's in the middle of a war, and then he drops to number 7 in the draft, which I'm sure is not a real problem. But if you look at that story, he had kind of a bad time here. So did the Flyers. And I kind of thought about it. I was like, it's almost like the misfortune of both of these parties kind of led to this moment. It's like the Flyers also weren't bad enough, and, they were trying to change their culture, but they also didn't bomb all the way to the end, and they didn't treat everybody like shit in the organization, and they didn't do any of that stuff at the end like everybody wanted them to, and they were rewarded for it. And I think there's a really nice narrative there. And I want to point this out to people who are watching footage of Michkov, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. I can't find anything of him that's like 17, 18 years old on YouTube. I'm sure it exists somewhere. Everything I see, he's 15, 16 years old. So when a lot of people are watching these highlights of him, he is like a child. And I will say this, I have yet to see any single hockey player of any time that I've been watching who can hold the puck around the net the way he does, the way he keeps possession, like the amount of moves, doing anything with the puck to get it elevated at any point is easier for him than any player I've ever seen. The way he just scoops the puck top shelf, the way he just goes around the team, even if he's around the net, he'll even put the stick in a weird angle and just pop it top shelf. I watch him score a goal from the corner, just kind of popping it over the shoulder from like an impossible angle. He shoots from anywhere, and they're all legitimate scoring chances for the most, at least 80% of them. What I see is a generational talent. I hate to put that pressure on him because you're right. Maybe he's not going to be. Maybe he's just going to be a great goal scorer, right? Maybe that's all he'll be. But I imagine from what I'm seeing and the fact that I'm not seeing him developed even. I don't know what you've seen, Steve, so I'm not judging your footage, right?
He hasn't changed.
I can only see him getting better and all of the weaknesses people talking about being annihilated. He was even coming in at 5'10", they said, 159. And then when he came into Philly, he was more like 175, 5'11". He's
looks like he's around 180 from what I saw of him there, carrying himself around.
I just feel like people are not really aware of what this kid actually is. And I'm not saying NHL teams, but the public image of it.
Well, then, there you go. Like the public, right? Like how many people can really spend 2 to 6 hours a day watching draft prospects, right? The NHL, I was always a diehard fan of it. That's why I do it. It's not because I get paid like a salary to do it. I do because I love to do it. But the biggest reason why, and I've said this before, is because there's always there's a void. That the information is they're like cliff notes, like what you see from the mainstream, whether it be and they do a good job, but like it's not enough. Whether it be NHL.com or TSN or Sportsnet, like they give you the media narrative, which is inverted pyramid, most important stuff up top, little stuff like minutia down at the bottom, and that's how you write your story. So you can only fit so much. Whereas what NHL scouts do is watch this kid play 65 to 85 times a year. So it's like, every time I would see someone see something negative about Michkov, it always tied back. It started with the Hockey News. And when the Hockey News decided to rank him behind Fantilli and downrank the Russian guys, the same magazine had an editorial from the publisher who said, my grandmother's Ukrainian, and basically saying like, the theme of the editorial was, we should not draft Russian players because they're in violation of international law because of the war. I'm like, whoa, hold on a second. Okay, these kids are 16, 17, 18 years old. They have nothing to do with it. Let's talk about building a potential Stanley Cup winner because my team stinks. How about we do that? I thought that was the purpose of the draft. So ever since that happened, then we saw everything shift to sharpshooting, the like every shift that Michkov had. There was a guy, and I'm not going to mention his name, he ranked Michkov like 17th because he felt like, his effort in the defensive zone. And this was in between when he was in the VHL and he was lighting it up there, but he wasn't with SKA because SKA was like the number one team in the league, and they called him up and he couldn't play. So it's like, he wasn't good enough to make it. So it's like little by little, week by week, you had this narrative that Michkov was a flawed prospect. And then the Hockey News doubled down at the World Juniors because why? Bedard now elevated himself. They doubled down when one of the guys from the Hockey News said, hearing reports he's got character issues. And it's like, let's pile onto it. Let's add more crap. Like, we're not hearing anything about Fantilli's character or the fact that he talks shit to the crowd every game he goes to. He's like flaunting and being cocky. Okay, is that a great, no, coaches usually say, hey, tone it down a little bit. No one ever talked about because he's Adam Fantilli. So, then everything changed back because Michkov did what? He seized the narrative himself with his play. There was no like his agent called up and said, can you please be nice to my client? Like, we really want him to draft. No, Michkov said, you're going to doubt me? All right, I'm going to set the freaking KHL scoring record for drafting your kids. And look at the names I'm going to surpass. And that's when people were like, maybe, I went back and I checked and, he's good again. Like, and it's like, oh God, like just come out and admit that you had an agenda. You didn't care about the kid. You didn't care about the effort and the work that he put in, clearly to become this elite goal scorer that you described him to a T, Yariv, and you say same thing with Vasili. Like, to get to that point, you have to work insane hours to get to that point. And you're not born.
Extremely competitive. You can just see how he is.
Yeah, and so like, Crosby had it, McDavid had it, these elite, Bedard, they had it, and I'm really just, it was upsetting to see it. I remember tweeting it out towards the end, like, the media is doing this, man, and like, the media. I don't want to lump everybody together, but like when you would see like character concerns, like it's like, all right, what about everybody else? What about the other freaking 400 kids at Central Scouting ranks? They don't have character issues. Leo Carson missed a practice. He overslept. He literally overslept. That is like the biggest red flag, isn't it? In the NFL, the NBA, like, he missed a practice. He overslept. And it's like, but no, he's a really good prospect. And everything else is fine. I wouldn't worry about it. But so I think we've gone on enough about Michkov. I like clearly this is a kid that I am rooting for him. I don't care what uniform he wears. The treatment that he got was unjust. It was unfounded. And it was borderline, sensationalism, almost like yellow journalism, where it's like, we want to paint this narrative. And I don't even know what the narrative, what was the end state? We want Michkov to be drafted at 25th overall. And so some people were saying that.
Team gets, is it a playoff team
they were like scouts from those teams are the ones going to the media and saying negative stuff about him. He could drop.
Yeah,
but
he's
it's
terrible.
Like, no,
he's an awful kid. Yeah.
No, because like, but again.
But I don't know if you know the full story here, but Philly, I mean, Danny Briere, and this is exactly what I was hoping for. This is what I told you, Steve. He's going to be sneakily aggressive. I knew it.
Yeah.
I freaking knew it because I know the way he plays on the ice. So sneakily aggressive, right? And they brought him in early. They brought him in for a stealthy meeting.
Yeah.
They loved him. Apparently, Keith Jones and him hit it off immensely, which I could see. Keith Jones extremely charismatic, and they sold him on the team. And I personally, what I see, Steve, is the next face of the franchise. Like that's all I see. I watch him play, and I'm like, I've watched a lot of prospects. Not as many as you, but watch a lot of kids. I've never seen a kid move like this at 15, 16. I've never seen anything like this.
Just the way he commands the ice, like just his dynamism out there, man.
Well, even I like all the comparisons. Like I noticed you have to combine players when you compare him to other Russian players. He doesn't play like other Russian players. He's something unique of his own. Yeah. He has, he's the goal scorer of Ovechkin, and yet moves like I don't know. He
controls the puck too, like a wizard.
Like Datsuk, right? I noticed. Like he will come back. He will take the puck from you immediately. He's relentless. He's aggressive. I get he might not be the best in the defensive zone, but he's not going to be a lazy perimeter Russian, typical Russian goal scorer guy.
Not even
that is not what I see at all.
He's an intense competitor. Yeah, okay,
that's what I saw.
There's a video I tweeted out where he was going into the corner. Well, the puck was rimmed around. So he's in the offensive zone, and the puck was rimmed around. So it got to like the half wall, like where the end boards and the half wall meet. And Simashev, the kid who was drafted ahead of him, was playing for Loco, and it was a 50-50 battle. It's a 50-50 battle between a 6'3", 195-pound defenseman and a 5'10", 5'11", 170-pound, 75-pound wing. And so you saw them. These two kids know each other, right? They're the two, like it's the same, draft year. They were going to collide. Right? Michkov basically lowered his shoulder, and not only did he stand up to Simashev, who had the momentum, by the way, he knocked him backwards just enough to collect the puck and win the 50-50 battle. And what he did thereafter doesn't matter. The point is that if you're going to say this kid doesn't try hard or he floats, or like, no, this kid is an intense competitor. And the one thing that I noticed about like watching him all these years, seeing him live too, which was a great treat, was that, you know what his real red flag is? You know what his biggest problem was? And this is a fair... Say again?
Shoots too much. He shoots them everywhere.
No. He's way too smart for his teammates. He outsmarts his own teammates. So you ever see like an elite quarterback like Brady or any elite quarterback in history, Montana, where like they throw the ball expecting you to be there because that's what you want. That's what the play was.
Players can't, get to that point.
And so like what he'll do, Michkov, is he's an inside out player. He'll beat you inside or out.
Yeah.
He kind of expects his teammates to understand like elasticity and spacing. So like he'll bunch up to support the puck on his zone entry. So let's say his teammate's carrying the puck, but the intent in a way, maybe this should see that he's cocky or he's like, is that he's like saying, drop it off to me and then release and go and I'll work my magic. Like every coach probably would say, Matteo is the best player we have on the ice. Do as he does or listen to what he has to say. And so I noticed a lot of times where like his intention was correct. He read the traffic. He read what the defense was doing. He read where the goalie's eyes were. And he was like, all right, now release like teammate or line mate or defenseman. Go into that gap that's just open. Because why? Why is there a gap open? Because everyone's watching Michkov.
Yeah.
And you have to watch him. That's what he brings. Just like Bedard. When Bedard is controlling the puck, everybody and the coaches will say, stop staring at Bedard. Focus on the other guys. And the great ones find a way to exploit that. So that was his weakness. That was my drawback. When I was scouting, I'm like, he outsmarts his own teammates. So maybe try to simplify things. Those few instances where his teammates have no idea what the hell's going on. But it's rare. I mean, usually, think about this guy when he has line mates that he has chemistry with.
That's all I keep thinking. That's all I keep thinking about.
He's never had that. He's always had like a new line mate
from team to team, right?
Yeah. So this kid, he's going to be on the fly.
Crazy.
Whether it's going to be a Farabee or a Cates or a Frost or a
Gauthier, who knows?
Gauthier, Forster, like anything, whomever. So, but again, no one wanted to talk about this stuff except us. So
yeah, it's crazy.
Well, that's all I want to talk about.
It's crazy with the Michkov stuff because we were talking on previous episodes that it's a shame he never got to participate this past year's World Juniors, because I think if he did, people really would have seen his
That's
talent, his
he
skill, and he
he
would have been
wouldn't have
able to
landed
go.
here.
No, exactly. So
No,
it's
no,
a
no.
benefit. It's a benefit for the Flyers in a way. And just back to the competitiveness thing that you guys were talking about, it's clear that he's a real competitor. And I will say that kind of, for me, I mean, puts a chip on his shoulder that, hey, like, I went seventh. Yeah, like, when I get to this league, I'm gonna show you all that I probably shouldn't have went at number 7.
I almost guarantee that from him. Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. So because you did mention a 3-year thing here, I want to ask you one thing here, Steve, and then I do want to finish up the Michkov conversation, get to everybody else, but this is just very important for this organization. My gut tells me, and again, I'm only watching highlights of him, or I found like some full game stuff, but like all from 2 years ago, nothing recent.
Yeah.
I'm watching this kid already. He's already playing against older competition. He is lighting these kids up. I haven't seen him recently, but I see no issue. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if he had to play in the NHL today, I believe he would be, I don't know, a competitor for Rookie of the Year immediately. I don't expect him to. I do suspect that every single season, except for this upcoming year, the Flyers will attempt to bring him here. Will they be successful? I don't know. But it'll be amicable. It won't be, it'll be a fair contract deal, whatever happens. But I do suspect they'll try to get him over here after this humongous draft year that we have upcoming, where we're probably picking high again. We have Gauthier, we have this high pick coming in, we have Michkov. That's enough to already, label your rebuild right there. How do you see that? Am I off? Because when I see a generational talent, that's what I see. I'm like, we suck. And he would probably make us too good for where we need to be. So you wouldn't even want him here, but he would immediately become arguably our best goal scorer outside of TK or maybe Tippett, but he'd be in that conversation with the three of them immediately as an 18-year-old, if not immediately better than both.
Yeah, he would have been like Svechnikov. He would if he was an import, right? Or if his KHL contract expired, because he was so talented that, let's just say hypothetically signed a contract for he signed it, I think, December of 21. So let's say he just signed a contract for 2 years, right? The remainder of 21, 22, and then 22, 23, he plays for Scott. He has, good to above average numbers. Absolutely. He would show up to camp, I think, and the organization would have a tough time. Not because like he was a high pick, but just because he's that much better than usually everybody else on the ice. Like the IQ, the hands, the goal scoring ability. Let's create a fantasy scenario where Michkov is now in training camp for the Flyers after being drafted, right? And he's going up against NHL caliber goalies, and he's humiliating them just like he humiliates every other goalie he's ever come across. That the goalies now, the goalie coaches, the goalie staff, the analytics types, the player development types, they're all going back to the GM and the coach and saying, yeah, we've never seen anything like this before, so we're just letting you know, like, we think he's okay and he's ready. And I think that's what we've seen when rookies do that, when rookies go to training camp and have a great showing. The issue is always what? The contract. Right? It's always like, oh, well, we got to let it slide because we're in the cap crunch and we have veterans who deserve it. But in the Flyers situation, they would although they have, they got rid of a couple of guys recently, but he'd be the kind of guy, in my opinion, that would, like I said, like Svechnikov with Barry in 18. Like you can't deny, like there would be no reason to say no. As far as like his development in the KHL and trying to get him over here, I think that's all going to be dependent on Michkov himself as well. And the reason why I say that is he's said it in many interviews. If you go use Google the right way and type in Cyrillic, you'll find some of the Russian articles. And remember, Michkov in Russia is like Bedard in Canada. So TSN and Sportsnet and Toronto Sun or the Star and all these papers are writing about him all the time. They were doing the same thing in Russia. Like, he has godlike status.
Yeah, he's a star, exactly.
So, like, there were always articles about him. And he's a very humble kid. Like, at least in the interviews, he's like, all I care about is winning. All I care about is winning. I care about, my team. In those interviews, he said that being a top line player for SKA is like his next goal. Like winning the Stanley Cup, being a Flyer, of course, yeah. But I'm speculating here. But based on what he said in interviews, like, he feels like the SKA situation is unfinished business. He appeared for them in I think 12 games or 14 games a couple of years ago in his draft -1, and that was like okay. And so you would think that he would play the full season this year. Unfortunately, he has the knee injury. He has to go to Ska Neva in the VHL. By that point, by the time he's done lighting them up, the Scott team in the KHL is one of the best teams in the league as usual. And it's like, all right, we're not going to give you the keys to the castle just yet, but you got to earn it. He goes, he plays there a couple of games. Maybe he bitched about it. Maybe he didn't. And that's where you had to transfer over to Sochi. So in those interviews, like he said that it's like he took it as his demotion. He took it as his demotion. He did not make Ska. And so he took out his frustration on the rest of the KHL and the VHL. So I think that he wants at least one season with Ska. I don't think you'll be getting him at any point this season.
No.
And then maybe he wants to win.
They don't want him this season. They don't want him this season.
Maybe he wants to win a Gagarin Cup. So kind of like the Michigan kids who went back because they want to win a Frozen Four. You'll get the same thing. So let's say Michkov plays for Ska this year and they lose in the final. Like it crushes him. But I don't know. Like, there's no transfer agreement. And they paid him a lot of money. Like they signed him to the deal when he was like 15 years old. Or 16. He just turned 16, right? December of 21. Yeah. So he's going to probably want to honor that contract. So I wouldn't like hold my breath. But then again, stranger things have happened. If they could find a workaround to maybe get him to give the money back. I mean, I don't know. I'm poking on my ass right now.
No. I think you're absolutely right. I think it depends on Michkov, and I think the Flyers can figure it out. I don't think anything is going to be done to rub the KHL in the wrong way, at least not intentionally. I don't think we should expect anything like that. I think it's just a conversation they're going to have after the season and to see if they can get him down here in 2, get him down here after 1, whatever it is. But the Flyers will want him over here earlier if they can. It just will it be possible. The only thing, and we should bring this up, Ivan Fedotov right now, his contract is still in flux. The only thing I think about is we have a valid contract with him. We had one last year with him. And they didn't bring him over. So they already screwed up on their own with that situation. I'm not saying that anybody owes the Flyers anything specifically, but if you want to start a deal, I mean, it can start there, especially if you're going through the KHL. But again, that's all speculative. Nobody has any idea. But I will say, and this is a shout out to Anthony Sanfilippo, who's Steve, he's like our biggest rumor guy. He's tied in with the Flyers. He was saying, and again, this is all speculation on his part, but he has pretty good confidence that Michkov will not take 3 years in Russia and that they will be trying to bring him over next year. I would imagine that's the case.
Yeah.
Will they be successful? I don't know. But like I said, in my opinion, he's NHL ready. If you can get him even out of the Bedard window, maybe he can win Rookie of the Year for you, create even more buzz, because the amount of money that he will generate is worth paying off the KHL alone. Just like jersey sales and advertised revenue and all that will pay for itself. So,
yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what happens for sure.
Yeah. Sorry. Anything else left to say on Michkov?
No, nothing at all.
Okay. We went to town on Michkov. So let's move forward with the next pick in the draft. And this guy is, I guess, let's say, going off of his father's reputation, right? He's kind of a bigger player. The 6'2", 180-pound I have him listed at. I don't know if that's accurate. Oliver Bonk, who was taken 22nd overall, a right-handed defenseman playing for the London Knights. Steve, give us your breakdown.
Well, first we have to look at the strategy because the Flyers needed right defensemen. And so I know I said this on previous podcasts. I'll say it again. It's fair to ask. I know at this point who cares because they have Michkov, but it's fair to ask. We'll never know, but still fair. It's fun to play this game sometimes. If Reinbacher was there, was he ahead of Michkov on the Flyers board? We don't know that. We'll never know that. Because they definitely needed a right defenseman. And the fact that both Arizona and Montreal were willing to go for need at that high of a slot, you could also assume that maybe the Flyers.
I'll say this. Sorry, Steve. Don't mean to bounce in. Chuck Fletcher was interviewed, and this doesn't answer the question directly, but Chuck Fletcher was on 32 Thoughts, and he did say that Michkov was number 2 on their board behind Bedard. So
all right, that's great.
They had Michkov when he was GM as number 2 on the board. So
the Flyers have good scouts. Okay, they actually have smart people working for the organization.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, no, all right. So now that we got that out of the way, then But even still, like I think when you think about like what the pick was when you traded it, you traded away the guy that you thought was going to be your franchise defenseman, who at one point was the franchise defenseman.
Yeah.
And that was part of the package. You also got a prospect back in Helga Granz who plays the right side. So I felt like the Flyers with that pick were going to grab a defenseman, and the fact that like 4 went, I guess, well, like that's 2 of them went higher than expected. Well, 3 if you really think about it, with Reinbacher, Simashev, and Verlander, 3 defensemen in the top 11. Then I'm like, all right, well, the Flyers need a right defenseman, but I don't think Sandy Palika is going to be there. And I thought he would have been a really great fit because of the offense that he provides.
Yeah.
But Bonk is a guy that we all knew. He kind of like reminds me of Rasmus Sandin in the 2018 draft, where everybody was talking about the big names, right? Bouchard, Dobson, obviously Rasmus Dahlin, Buquist, who was the other guy? Quinn Hughes. That was like, I think we called it like the big 6. There was, and Ty Smith was the other one. And then I'm like, well, this guy Sandin, though, he's not that bad. He plays for Sault Ste. Marie. And I remember like what was on MSG Network saying, hey, look for this guy Sandin. And he was drafted late in the first round. And he's been better than Boquist. He's been better than Ty Smith. So he's a pretty good NHL defenseman, obviously. So I think that Bonk, it was a similar prospect draft year production and draft year resume wise, that he had a really good year. He was a de facto number 1 defenseman on London. They were a Memorial Cup caliber team. They just missed out making the Memorial Cup. They lost to Peterborough in the OHL final. That London team had a Logan Mailloux, a first-round pick on the top pairing. They had Isaiah George, who was older in 03. He was an Islander draft pick. They also had Jackson Edward, who was an 03 as well, or maybe an 04. And then Bonk was like one of the younger guys in that blue line, the second youngest guy in the blue line, but he was the problem solver. And, he could quarterback the power play. He could be physical. He could kill penalties. So what you have is a really mature kid, a kid who I had him ranked 37th, but I mocked him like mid to late first round throughout the year. This is a guy that automatically he is your top prospect right now on the right side. The left side, Zamula and Andrea, they've York, they've paid their dues. They're ahead of him in terms of player development, but playing in the AHL, playing in the NHL. But I think that Bonk has the potential to be the best one out of all of them. That he has the potential to be a top pairing defenseman for the Flyers on the right side. And I'm going to be honest with you, like, I'm going to put this out there, even though I had Ryan back at 12 and, Bonk 37. I don't really see the reason why I had that big of a gap between the two were because I'm pro forward. I realized that the greatest forwards in the NHL always come out of the first round, and the greatest defensemen in the NHL usually come out of anywhere from the mid,
second,
late second. So because of that, I have to, I have to pay attention to that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're in 10 years down the road that we're like, wait a minute, Bonk and Reinbacher, they're similar players. Like just because Bonk didn't play in the NLA against men, I don't think if you took Bonk and you put him in Europe right now, I don't think he'd be rattled. Like that's just not who he is. He is he's got a high panic threshold, and clearly having a dad who played 1,000 NHL games
helps. Yeah,
it definitely helped in that regard. Not does it always help. We've seen a lot of kids fail despite having dads as all-star dads as mentors, but. I like the pick. It made sense to me. There were defensemen available, but not really from the right side. There were other defensemen who were flashier, more offense. Dragicevic, Bo Akey would have been my guy if they drafted Bo Akey because I ranked him ahead of Bonk. I would have been like, really through the moon. I don't care if there was a Flyers taking him, but he ended up going to Edmonton the second round. I admit that I was bullish on him, but again, Bonk is a mature, calm. Poised, skilled, do-it-all defenseman. And we saw that in the OHL playoffs. And he kind of like outplayed the older guys, And so when Dale Hunter says, no, I want you to be my troubleshooter, my problem solver, it says a lot about the kid, how advanced he is.
That was pretty exceptional. What I see from him, Steve, is a very raw defenseman. Like I see a lot of raw tools. Like he's big, he's strong, he skates, but I look at his shot and I go, okay, it's a little sloppy. Like I can see where upside was considered with this kid, not where he is today. And I talk about it all the time on this podcast. When you were drafting, you were typically drafting a mold. You're not drafting a finished product in the NHL. The I talked about this with Michkov, and I still stand by this. He is the least risky draft pick the Flyers have ever taken. There is zero doubt that he will be a high-end player in the league. That almost has never happened. Bonk seems like a mold where if all goes well, he's a top pairing defender. And if he misses the mark to some degree, he's at worst a number 6 on your team, but realistically will land as like a number 4, number 3, maybe a number 2. But he has the mold there, everything. And this is what I heard Brent Flair say, is that he sees him as, a lot of tools that are raw. And I see that too, where he doesn't really look like even close to a finished product. And that's why defensemen usually go in the second, third round that are so great. They're not even close to finished products at this point.
No, I mean, the thing is with Bonk is the hockey IQ, the decision making, his skating is average at best. The shot, I think the shot is okay. It's a low back, it's a low backswing. He gets it. It's accurate. It's on net. So he's not like a classic power play quarterback, but he could do it if he needs to and be a shooting option. But what I liked the most about him was the one-on-one battles and his gap control. When I think of like a raw defenseman, I think of a guy that like Owen Pickering last year, where like they have the size and the skating and the point production, but they don't marry it all together. Bonk with London this year, for the most part, every time I watched him, he was marrying it all together. Not like in an elite Rasmus Dahlin or Miro Heiskanen kind of way, like what they are right now, but like killing plays, like stick on puck, standing up at the line, not backing down from a physical challenge, clean outlet pass. Like, you get the puck after winning a battle. Now your back is you got 200 feet of ice to your back. He's able to make small plays, spring breakouts. So I think the hockey IQ is going to help him overcome that initial like, oh shit, I'm in the AHL and everybody's a lot faster here. But I think the most important thing about drafting him though is goes back to what I said, that the right side is not very deep. So he doesn't have a whole lot of competition in terms of why did they bring him back?
No, they let Wiley go.
All right, we tried.
We're friends with Wiley's mom, actually, so we kind of knew it was going to happen ahead of time.
All right. Well, I liked him. He was really good in Everett. I thought he was okay, but they moved on from him. They brought in Grands, but other than that, and some of the other kids that they've drafted, and of course the rebuild isn't done, so they'll probably next year's draft is heavy with defensemen. So but yeah, again, overall it's a good pick. Like they could have went they didn't draft a center. And were there centers available at the time? I thought maybe Callum Ritchie might have been a good fit for them. But you still had a need at the right defense, and the left side looks pretty good, all things considered, and how plays have developed in Lehigh Valley. So, they went for the defenseman, maybe by like 10 spots higher than I thought, but still, he's a good prospect.
Fair enough. Vasili, anything to add?
Yeah, I thought, Steve, you brought up a great point about his hockey IQ. I tried to ask him about what defined his game the most, and that's what Bonk said. He said that his IQ and his decision making on the ice is his greatest strength. So I think that's a great thing, obviously, to have as a defenseman, somebody who thinks the game really well. As we've seen, some of the physical attributes or other things can be worked on, but if you don't think the game at a high level, it's hard to ever get there, right? Especially as a defenseman in the NHL. And for Bonk too, I haven't seen too much of him, but I watched a couple, some highlights and things like that. And what I did notice is, he's 6'2", so he's pretty big, but he's not the biggest of guys still. And he uses his size really effectively at 6'2", closes off guys on the boards a lot with the size, and his stick work, just in gapping up, he seems like he's always in the right position in terms of his gaps. From what I saw, that was limited. So he just seems like a smart player, and I think ultimately in defenseman and what you're trying to draft there, you want to go for players who have a high hockey IQ and understand where the plays are heading on the ice. I think too, if you look at kind of Bonk's game, there's a lot of room to grow, like you were saying, right? He's nowhere near finish, and there's going to be an ability for him to probably work on a lot of things in his game that might not be that elite level, like the skating, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to our next pick. This one was the Flyers' second round pick. The Flyers traded a 6th round pick and their second from 2024, one of the ones they got in the Provorov deal, to get Carson Bjarnason, a 6'3", 186 goaltender. He's left-handed. Plays for the Brandon Wheat Kings. He is 17 or just turned 18 years old in June 30th. So was definitely one of the younger guys in the draft. And the Flyers were very aggressive to get him. I knew that they were going to go get goalies. Flair pretty much told us that he was going to do that. And I'm really intrigued by this. I love goalie projects. I love that they picked high on them because that's usually where the best goalies are kind of in the second, third round. So I like this aggressive move. I would have been fine with trying to grab a center also in the second round or in the first round and then trying to, move up for a defenseman like you were saying, Steve. Potentially, but I really like this pick. What can you tell us about Carson Bjarnason?
All right. Well, I like the fact that they drafted a goalie. First of all, I was like, you got to draft a goalie. Like you have all these picks, you got some extra ones from moving, with the Provorov deal and everything. So I was like, it's a strong goalie draft. We knew that, and remember that at the point the Flyers were picking, that we already saw, and I think that's what triggered the move was we saw Rabel, well, actually, I think it was Guyan, Rabel, and Augustine all get plucked by, I think, like 41, right? So now you have, okay, the goalie trend is going to continue now.
Yeah.
And so they had no choice. So at that range, he was definitely one of the best remaining goalies. If you go by Central Scouting's rankings, they had him number one the whole season. But when I researched these kids, he played for a Brandon team that was okay. They were mediocre. He saved their bacon plenty of times. So he had that ability. That's what I look for is the two things I really look for in goalie prospects, besides what their weakness is and etc. is, well, actually, it's three things. Number one, how good are they after losses? Like, do they have like resilience? When they have a bad game, every goalie's going to have a bad game. Do they bounce back? Right. So that's the first thing I look for. I look for the ability, like the quality start percentage, right? It's an advanced stat that I think Rob Bowman created. It's kind of like with pitching and quality starts, like 6 innings, 3 earned runs, right? Or for a quarterback, 65% completion percentage, no interceptions, maybe a touchdown or 2. That's a quality start. So for goalies, it's usually like 3 goals or less. 25 shots or more, something along those lines. And then the last thing that I look for is the way that they close out, like how do they like close out a season. So and like playoff wise. So Bjarnason definitely checked the block of for most of the season. He checked the block of the quality starts. He also checked the resiliency thing. But late in the season, he had a little bit of a meltdown. And it lasted for about 10 games. Brandon was out of it, but when the meltdown started, they were still kind of in the hunt. And so maybe he was fatigued. He was overworked, being like a 17-year-old kid who was the number one goalie on a WHL team that was mediocre to begin with. But then what happened is he had this little like 10-game slump. Save percentage was around like 840, not good. And then he goes to the U18 Worlds to be the number one for Canada. Now, when I looked at the Canadian roster, I had no problem saying, as an American, that is one of the best Canadian entries I've seen at this tournament. They had everybody. Everybody except for Bedard, right? Because he's an 05. But as far as the 05 year group, I thought Canada was a shoo-in for the gold, and that all Bjarnason had to do was really just show up and not make any boo-boos. And in the first game against Sweden, he got torched. He gave up, like, I think he was in for all 8 goals. And he was getting beat from distance. So the trend that started at the end of the WHL season carried over to the World Juniors, to the World U18s. And that by the time Canada was in the bronze medal game, they're playing a 16-year-old kid and not Bjarnason. And so that's like, okay. So it's a fairly long sample. You could definitely deduce that, hey, okay, he had a bad stretch, but it doesn't cancel out the 3/4, the previous 3/4 of the season. And then now you got to factor in the technical aspect, the size, the pedigree, etc. So the fact is, he was definitely one of the best goalies on the board at that point. I would have taken the kid Fowler from the USHL, who was phenomenal. And you want to talk about closing out strong. He led the USHL in every category. He literally every major category. Wins, goals against, save. And then in the playoffs, he allows 1 goal or less in 7 of the 9 games. And he won the World Junior A Challenge for Team USA. So I thought this kid was the better prospect. Still, all that said, Bjarnason, up until about that, what was it, like mid-March, he was phenomenal. And even Bedard said, like, yeah, I can't score on this guy. He's, because he's a WHL goalie. So agree with the pick, agree with the strategy. Wouldn't have been my first choice. But again, it's all based on a 10 to 15 game sample. I think that's something that he could definitely overcome. It's not like he can't fix. And the issue really was distance shots, glove hand blocker, mid. It wasn't like he was getting beat short side high. He was getting beat, like mid blocker from the middle, like medium danger shots. So it could be like a little bit of a mental issue, right? Not as much technical. It could be fatigue, but still, when it comes to goalies, this is really nitpicking because all it takes is like 2 starts, have a good camp. Everything is in the past, and I see him being one of the best goalies in the WHL next year anyway. So he's got something to prove. Have a chip on your shoulder. There you go.
Fair enough. Vasili, you have anything to add on Bjarnason?
Yeah, for Bjarnason, obviously, just with him, being ranked as the #1 prospect by Central Scouting, that's good value for the Flyers. Despite the fact a couple of goalies went ahead of him, obviously there's something that the scouts see that to make him the #1 there. He's a big kid, right? 6'3", 181 pounds, and he just turned 18, so there's still even room for him to grow even more. I asked him specifically if there was anything that defined his game, and he said a lot of his depth play in the net was one of his biggest strengths. He said that he lets the pucks come to him, and usually with a bigger goalie, that's what you see, right? You try to use your size to cover a lot of the net. So I think that's probably a technique we'll see him use a lot in the future, and it'll be interesting to see his development. It's crazy to me how some people are saying, well, the Flyers picked 2 goalies back to back. Carter Hart's on the way out. Yeah. I saw that mentioned. I'm like, these goalies that are getting picked right now are
like, 18.
They're like 7 years from being part of the
Let's talk when they're 24, 25. So I think it's something the Flyers need to do, right? You need to replenish your goaltending system, despite the fact that they have a really good prospect pool for goalies. You have to keep picking these goalies, and usually 2nd round, 3rd round is where you find the gems. So I think Bjarnason's a good pick for them there. And it's good value for them to move up and select him, because if you don't do that, chances are he's off the board pretty quick with all the goalies getting taken, right? So
yeah.
Totally. And my attitude towards goalies are just you draft them, you leave them alone, and you see where it ends up in the end.
Basically. Voodoo, right?
Let's go on to the Flyers' next pick. Again, this was their first, I think, 3rd round pick. Let me double check. Yep, 3rd round pick. This was number 87. Egor Zavragin. Wow, I said this like 15 times today, and I still got it wrong. From Canty Minisik.
Monteugri. I don't know why they call it Canty. Yeah, it's freaking Monteugri. That's the name of his team.
Okay, thank you for correcting me.
All right, so
goaltender again.
His deal was Zavragin. All right, so he's a kid that he's a kid that I put in my 1st round, my preseason poll, because I knew when I was doing my list last May, I'm like, all right, it's clearly a forward-heavy draft. Not a lot of defensemen. I think I only had 3. I said, I want to get a goalie in there just to take a shot. You know what I mean? Like it's a preseason ranking. It's not like definitive. It's really like more like a watch list for me who I need to focus on first, and I'll work my way down. Before Central Scouting comes out. So I knew about Zavragin because I came across an article on the MHL website where Tretiak was like saying this guy is like, he's the next great Russian goalie. They were comparing him to Askarov. So I didn't, when I watch MHL or Russian hockey, I'm not really that concerned with the kids who aren't draft eligible, unless it's like a Michkov type where, you just get excited. So with Zavragin, like Monteugri had a lot of draft eligible talent 2 seasons ago, One kid, Yaporov, I was looking at. And anyway, so I'm like, oh, all right, this guy's Zavragin. He's pretty good. So now I'm like, all right, if Tretiak says the kid is okay, the numbers were good as a split the starter role, right? Shared duty, put him in the first round, and then he gets off to a rough start this year. And right off the bat, I'm like, all right, Steve, you're an idiot for putting this kid in your top 32 because he's not, he's never going to make it. Well, he rebounds though, and I think was it Volokin? He and his other buddy that they shared the net were both 05s. They both got drafted. Volokin, I think was his name. He got drafted later on after Zavragin, but nonetheless, they never really went to either guy to dedicate the net to either one. They would just keep alternating. Even the playoffs, like Zavragin would go out and have a 42 save, a 38 save, a pair, or 2 goals against, and then the next night the other guy would play. So, but he is a technically sound, calm, top of the crease, above the crease, aggressive. But not in an Askarov kind of way. He's not like all over the place and like herky jerky. Very composed, and you watch him play against bigger teams or more talented teams. He was able to steal games, so he checked all those blocks for me. I ended up moving him back down to I think the high fourth round. But the Flyers got him 87. But what I love is the fact that the Flyers went back to back. So they took 2 goalies I liked a lot. They were both in my top 115. And once they took care of that requirement, and I thought it was a requirement, even though like Ursan and Fedotov, like if you really think about the Kolosov, Fedotov, Ursan, right? And then maybe you want to throw Sandstrom in there as well. Like Flyer goaltending isn't really that bad of shape. Like I know that's a really good nucleus. That's a core right there. And I told you how high I was on Fedotov, that he might have like come in and won the job for the Flyers out of camp. Forget about Lehigh Valley before the whole shenanigans happened. But but I still agree with the strategy that it's a goalie heavy draft. The 3 or 4 biggest names went first. You have a shot to now grab 2. You do it, and now you can focus on your high end skill guys. And it goes back to what we've talked about for the last 3 years. The Flyers do well with high yield or high offense forwards in the later rounds, right? Cates, Denoyer, who else am I forgetting? Lindblom. Like they've got really great value out of forwards in the 5th or 6th round that teams will pass on. Oh, he's too small or whatever. So I agree with the strategy where you get the goalies out of the way, and now you could go and start attacking the highly skilled guys in the later round. So, I have no, like that's an A grade, right? On that strategy alone to me gives them an A grade because they got 2 of the top, let's say 7 or 8 goalies in the draft back to back. And now you don't have to worry about it for the rest of the draft. You still had like, I think 5 more picks, 6 more picks. So yeah, it was a good, I like what they did.
Awesome. Vasili, anything to add?
Yeah, so I think like Steve was saying, it's smart obviously to get the goalies off the board early, and then you can kind of play to your strengths with the forward development because they've obviously done a good job. Even somebody else to name that looks like a late round pick that might be a steal is Alexis Gendron, right, from last year in the 7th round, who lit it up in the playoffs this year in juniors. So I mean, the Flyers usually do well with the forward, so it makes sense to kind of go the goalies early and get somebody that you really like. And I mean, they got picked at 87th. And I mean, I think a lot of people had him going a bit higher potentially. So it's obviously good value for them there. And I mean, he had good stats in the MHL with Lamonti Ugri, right? He had 920 save percentage, 249 goals against average. And then even in his 16-year-old year with them in 2021, he had a 213 and a 930 in the MHL too. So like really, really good numbers. So just based off of that, I mean, makes sense to go with the pick. And I think for the Flyers, it's just another add to a strong, goalie prospect pool, essentially.
Yeah, it's very strong.
I love the Flyers goalie prospect pool. I think it's the strongest I've ever seen it. And you have guys at all age groups. And even you mentioned Kolosov, right? He's older than Carter Hart, right? It's like you have Kolosov, Hart, you have Sandstrom, who's older than Hart too. You have Ersan, who's younger. It's like every single age group is covered right now, and I've never seen the Flyers do that. Even what's his name, Peterson, coming over here is 27, 28. another veteran above there. So they really have everything covered at least.
Yeah, but he's got a lot of work to do. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And hopefully he can
Yeah.
fix that work here so we can trade him next year at a 50%
Yeah. He's
retention.
expensive. He's expensive.
Yeah, he's gonna be expensive third string goaltender, that's for sure. Maybe even fourth string on this team. All right, let's move on to our next round. And this is maybe the winner of the coolest name. Round 3, 95 overall, Denver Barkey, 5'9", 155, a centerman for the London Knights. And obviously you see 5'9" and thin, and you hope, please be our Braden Point in the third round. How are we looking on that, Steve?
Well, I just want to clarify, and they list him as a center, but he played wing for pretty much the entire
Okay.
season. He played top line wing. So remember, they drafted Bonk. He played for the London Knights. They drafted Barkey. He played for the London Knights. And both those players, as first year draft eligibles, as 2005s, had a profound impact on the team's success. And listen, Peterborough, the goalie Simpson there is the only thing that really stopped London from going to the Memorial Cup. And the Memorial Cup is a huge deal. So when you are playing 22 to 24 minutes a night and you match up against top pairings in that environment like Bonk was, and then you're Barkey, and now you're on the top line with Winterton, the Seattle prospect, and then Easton Cowan, who went in the first round to Toronto. That line was electric. They were getting everything done. There was precision plays. They were, Barkey's got the dog, and I'm just thinking because his last name was Barkey, but a dog on the bone mentality, like hustles, hits. He was a high priority pick. He's played for Team I think he was a high priority pick in the OHL, but he's played for Team Canada at the big tournaments. So he has a strong reputation. He's not like a guy that he was a scrappy type who worked his way up. No, he was drafted. He was brought in to be a top guy, and he wasted no time. That is, and the forget about the speed and the energy and the if you want to call it the motor. He can make skilled plays. He makes a lot of high-end skilled plays. And Cowan and Barkey specifically, they're almost like twins out there. One's a lefty and the other one was a righty. They will crisscrossing and drop passes through the legs. And, again, this is the OHL. It's not what it used to be. So you could kind of get more space and time to do stuff like that. But even still, to execute those plays at top speed is a big deal. So I love it. I had him at a top 32 pick in March. I realized I was being a little bit too bullish. I thought about holding firm on it. But I just was like, okay, I'm definitely being a little bad because I got excited watching him play. So I put him in the first round. But I had him at 59. So already right off the bat, he was drafted, I think, a good round later than he should have gone.
Overall, so the value,
Yeah, so you could see a Konechny type of a player. He's physical, he doesn't quit, he could skate, he's got soft hands, he can finish. You look at some of the goals he scored in the playoffs, back-breaking, clutch goals, momentum-swinging goals. London needed a stop, or like London would score, they have a lead, the other team would score to erase the lead. Barkey and his line would come back and say, "Oh, no, we'll take that momentum right back, thank you." So he's that kind of a player.
I love hearing that, and that's the exact type of player I would love to take in the third round. A guy with a high upside if he does make the NHL, and a guy that could be useful in any team's top 9 if he works out. It sounds like.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, he looks really talented. And just to add on Barkey there, Steve, I mean, you said you had him ranked 57th. I think Smart Scouting and Recruit Scouting had him at 38th and 47th respectively, 50th on Craig Button's list. So I mean, shows there there's a good value at 95th. A lot of people had him a lot higher. And just to speak to, I mean, you were saying there's some high end talent, just a lot of skill on the ice with his play. I mean, I read up a bit on him, and I mean, I've seen the consensus kind of been said that his elusiveness on the ice, the puck handling skills, a lot of stops and starts to kind of try to evade defenders. I mean, which is something obviously from that area of a pick is great to see, or in this round. And then really an energy guy too, right? Like you said, high motor type player, and I think the comparison for him, at least for the draft, was a Travis Konechny light, I think, which makes sense. And then even at the draft, like when some people asked him about comparisons that he would have himself, he mentioned Braden Point as somebody who tries to build his game and model it after, which makes sense. Obviously, smaller players. So yeah, I think it's a good pick. Just at 95th overall. I mean, the Flyers not a steal, but I think it could potentially be one. So
yeah, for sure. All right, let's move on to our next one. This one was a 4th-round pick, former Flyer Mike Knuble's son, Cole Knuble. He comes in at 5'11", 185. He's 19 years old, so he's a little bit of an overager for this one. But I'm actually really excited about this pick, and it seems like it's a guy who legitimate chance to make the NHL. And his numbers in the U.S. Hockey League were fantastic last year. Seems like he should have been drafted the first year, and somehow wasn't. Fill us in.
Yeah, he's just a gamer. He's a gamer. He shows up for every match. And you know what you're going to get from him. He's not a dynamic skater. There's nothing about his skating that you'd say is like, oh wow, but he continuously finds a way to get things done. Puck possession, stick handling.
Is he a center or a winger?
Center, yeah, he's a center.
Okay.
Yeah. Good. He can play wing, but he's a. I would say he's to me more of like a natural playmaker than anything else. Like you have physicality. It's more like strategic than it is like every freaking shift. But he's got like a solid frame. So he's not big, but he's solid. He plays big. Not afraid to go like chest to chest with a bigger defenseman in the corner. But for me, like he definitely should have, like you said, he should have been drafted last year. I don't know why. Forget about the NHL bloodlines. It's just like he's a leader. He's an on-ice leader. He leads by example. He leads. He's vocal too. But I really like the fact that when he played for a very good team, Fargo was very good this year. A lot of talent. When you have that much talent on one squad, it's tough to manage it as a top player, especially when you have the desperation or the pressure of getting drafted. He knew that he wasn't ranked that high, and that there's a chance that he might not get. He could get passed over again. But I thought that the game he played last year was the game he played this year. A lot of skill, a lot of grit. He doesn't have like, let's say, the size that you want, but like again, plays big, like quick hands. So like he's the kind of guy where he'll stick handle, he'll delay. Defensemen start lunging for the puck. He'll draw it back, maybe pivot, recalculate, and then find an opening, and then he'll like deceptively shift gears or like explode, if you want to use that term, and attack open ice. And once he's in open ice, he's got that vision and passing ability where he's going to make someone's going to have a good scoring chance because of it. So he was one of the best players in the league. He played in every situation. So to me, where did I have him ranked? I had him ranked 109. They took him at 103. So, clearly I support the pick.
Awesome. Anything to add, Vasili?
Yeah, for the Knuble pick, obviously bloodlines with his father. I think something that was mentioned while he was drafted is he has a willingness to go to the net and battle, even for a little bit of a smaller guy, kind of like his dad did, right? So that's always good to see the competitiveness out of him. And I think a knock on him for the prior year was that maybe his skating wasn't the greatest, and that's something he really worked on in the summer and improved. And got invited, I think, to Detroit's development camp last season as well, and we kind of really worked on that. So I think it's a good value pick for the Flyers there, and it's surprising, like you guys were saying, that he didn't get drafted last season.
Yeah, and I love it. I loved Mike Knuble, and I love it, and I love that he's more involved with the organization now, and it's awesome. It's like they're bringing the whole gang back together here.
Yeah. In the early 2000s, exactly.
Yeah, I love that era. So next we'll go to the next 4th-round pick. At number 120, the Flyers selected Alec Ciernik, left winger, 5'11", 175. He weighs in. Played in the Swedish league last year. I believe he's German, if I remember correctly.
He's 5 languages, which is crazy. Slovakian.
Slovakian.
Yeah,
Slovakian. Apologies.
Yeah, but right. Yeah, he's from German. It's on the birth certificate.
Okay, cool. So I didn't get that out of nowhere. All right, so tell us what we got in Alex.
All right, speed and skill. Okay, so this is the guy that we're going to look at. Not to knock the other forward that they drafted in the later round that we'll talk about in a second, but this is a kid that you want to keep an eye on because he has a ton of skill, quick hands. He's fast. The knock on him has always been a little bit of a perimeter player. Where it's kind of like if he's not doing something offensively, what's he really doing? And again, if this was a top 3 or 5 pick, it's not a big deal. But when you move further down, you kind of want to see kids that have a more well-rounded game. That being said, though, he continuously got promoted to the Allsvenskan, even in his draft -1 season, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So he's playing in the J20 in Sweden. He's a point a game, like doing everything asked of him, being on the power play. Just an overall skilled forward. So he's definitely a wing. I don't know if I had him at the center ice positions because like defensively, like the effort is there. So I don't want to make the kid out to be a floater. He's not a floater. He works hard. He back checks, etc. It's just that when he's controlling the puck along the wall, when he's entering the zone, sometimes he does the same thing over and over again. Whereas you watch a guy like, I don't know, obviously this is the extreme end of the spectrum in terms of like projectability. It's like Zach Benson, similar like fast finesse guy, but when he like skates to the zone at full speed, you have no idea what he's doing after he hits the line. He could go inside, he could go diagonal, he could go right down the boards, so he could just stop at a dime and peel back. Whereas with Ciernik, you're getting a little bit of I wouldn't call it tunnel vision. It's just like predictability. So, but again, he's the guy that I'm going to be looking at, like the Desnoyers, like the Cateses, etc. Who, the Flyers went for pure high-end skill in the middle to late rounds, and this is a guy that you go for. So I had him ranked 105, and he goes 120.
Love it. Yeah, he seems, again, like I was referencing, like you're taking a mold. If he puts it all together, maybe he ends up being a goal scorer. If not, maybe he's just a goal scorer in the European leagues or the AHL. But again, if he manages to hit, you might have a third line goal scorer here, right? Like that.
Yeah, he's a dual threat. He's not like, I wouldn't say he's like a pure playmaker or a pure goal scorer. He's a dual threat. He could do it all. He could score from the middle of the ice, from the slot, etc. But he's one of those guys where you want to see him play on one team for one season. Like he's always been up and down, then with tournaments, and that's why sometimes it makes the evaluation process a little tricky. But he was really good in the tournaments, playing top 6 for Slovakia power play. I think he was on Dvorsky's line too. So he's a guy that we'll see at the World Juniors. He'll be the front and center, and
yeah, that's what I expect, is that he'll be a big part of Slovakia's team. He had 2 goals, 1 assist in 5 games, +1 for them in the under 20s. So I expect him to be a top line player there. So that'd be cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything to add, Vasili?
Yeah, so for Ciernik, I think it's easy to say that. I mean, it's a good value pick for the Flyers there. I think probably you're right there, Steve. I mean, going back to the tournaments, I mean, this is probably why he has a bit of a higher rank on some of these rankings. Like Elite Prospects had him 61, McKenzie had him 63, Button had him 59. So for the Flyers to get him at 120, the tournaments probably play a factor in their rankings. But I think, I mean, it's good value once again. And I mean, we asked him, or I asked him at the draft, kind of what was the main skill that kind of defines his game. And he said that he thinks he's a smaller player, so speed's really a big factor to things for him. And that, I mean, he really uses his speed to create offensively and even come back defensively. So I think with him, just being a smaller guy, the speed's obviously a big thing. And I mean, it should be interesting. I think he has upside. I think it's a high swing pick for the Flyers, right? They see that there's, a lot of talent, and that if it develops down the line, that he could be like a second line, top out, potentially third line. So I think in round 4, you can't go wrong kind of going for that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's move on to the Flyers' next pick in the 5th round, 135. Another defenseman, right-handed, Carter Sotheran, playing for the Portland Winterhawks. This reminds me of like when the Flyers drafted Ethan Sampson in the 7th round. I think it was the 6th round. Sorry, 6th round.
Yeah.
Again, a big defenseman. Looks like, I'm going to say again, raw. Just I haven't seen him play, but I assume when you take a defenseman like this, he's got some pieces to put together, but shows promise and, at least the things that you can't teach, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please continue.
All right, so he's raw. Okay, he's definitely raw. He was a fairly high Bantam round pick. I think he might have been like 2nd or 3rd round. So when Portland, the Winterhawks were, building their team, they viewed him like, because of his size and his mobility, long reach, that you could see him as a top pairing guy. And not that it's too late for him to become that, because he's still young. But he was paired with a guy like Luca Cagnoni. He was the offensive guy. Sotheran, was the safety net. And so like my thing with Sotheran has been mostly like just consistency, right? You don't want to have a defenseman have like one great game where he's a vacuum cleaner, and the next game he's missing assignments and he's like floating from the slot and etc. So he's going to definitely require at least, I think, like 2 years in the WHL, 2 more seasons in the WHL before we get a really good idea of what he can be. I don't think he's going to put up a lot of points as long as Cagnoni's there, because Cagnoni's this guy that takes a gazillion shots and was one of the top goal scoring defensemen in the league this year. So maybe they view them as like a super pairing. They weren't the top pairing, so it wasn't like Sotheran was like logging like all these critical minutes. To me, he was like the 4th to 6th defenseman, even though he kind of was on the middle pairing. But listen, like I said, he's a right shot. Maybe he's the guy, where you could say that he's the one that replaces Wyatt Wiley. That similar type players in their draft year. Wiley played for more of like a defensive system, so maybe that helped him look cleaner on the defensive end. Maybe, but whereas Portland was like slightly above average, I guess they had some pretty good NHL talent, the drafted talent on there. But like top pairing should be the goal for next season. I don't see it happening. I think in 2 years you'll see him be one of the better defensemen in the on the team, and maybe even in the at least in the division or the conference. But he could be physical. He stands up at the line. I like his footwork. When you have quick feet and a long reach, and you could withstand a check from a standstill, right? So like if you're doing stick on puck at the line, and a guy's charging right at you, you have to be quick to react. And I think he does a pretty good job. If a guy beats him, he's got the quick feet and the long reach to still fix that player to the outside, or at least like try to use his stick to break up the rush. So I would say he's probably better on defense than on offense. The offense is limited. It's mostly first pass here, D to D passes there, wrist shot from the point off his back foot. Not a big, but again, the long-term potential is there. I just think that we thought he could have been like a top, 100 pick maybe at the beginning of the season. And, that rawness, I guess, maybe might have turned teams off, but not a bad option for the Flyers considering where they took him.
I like that. Vasili.
Yeah, I think taking him in the 5th round, like Steve was saying, it's a good option. I think Elite Prospects had him ranked at 55th. And they took him at 135. So I don't know if that's a good ranking, but that's pretty high. So I mean,
I don't know what I'm not going to get into them, but like the justification, it would have to be on a projection, because he did not have like the kind of season, and even in the playoffs, like I think his minutes got cut back like big time, if I recall correctly. So it's like
that might be on the left field from them.
Yeah, it might be like, well, we still think that he'll marry it all, and that's fair. But
hasn't done it yet.
Flyers got him in a good spot. I had him ranked. I had him ranked at 111.
Okay,
and they got 5. So I had him, maybe like just a little bit under a round higher. But he's a project, and
as they usually are, Steve, with the big defensive defensemen. I think what it is for them for the 5th round is he's big, he plays the defensive game, and there's some mobility, I guess.
There is definitely.
And that's probably what they see, and they're saying, hey, at 5th round, we'll see if we can develop the rest of it. But it should be interesting to see where it goes with him. Probably, like you're saying, a few years in junior, then probably years in the AHL before we see him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I imagine he's a long-term pick there, but the Flyers needed more defensive prospects and another right-handed defenseman.
They're stocking up on the right side.
Yeah,
for sure.
The D is no longer, but at least the depth there is no longer a problem. Let's go into the 6th round, our second to last pick.
That's a bit of an unknown, I think, too. But for Macpherson, for the 6th round.
Oh, yeah. So at taken at 172, Ryan Macpherson, like Vasili was saying, another relatively unknown player, a center at 6'1", 176, playing in the GOHL which
JHL,
I don't
yeah.
know very well. And Steve, I'm sure you'll have to fill us in. But obviously, type of player who's going to go play in the BCHL and then the NCAA at the University of New Hampshire in 2024-25. Also a long-term, what seems to be a prove-it type of pick. A guy who has had really good success outside of kind of the bigger leagues, and now to see if that potential could be taken elsewhere. What can you tell us about Macpherson?
All right, so the Go JHL is basically like Ontario kids that it's almost like Junior A. I don't think it's considered Junior A because the OJHL is Junior A. I think
Yeah.
Go JHL, I don't know what level it is, but like you could play there and still go to the CHL and you maintain your NCAA eligibility if you want to go. But so he played for a team called Leamington or Leamington. I think it's Leamington. And they were a good team. And he and his twin brother were the stars of the team, playing for Leamington. And my theory, now I did not have him ranked. What I usually do is at the end of the season, if I have time, and usually I have like about a day, I'll go and look at all the leagues. And this is a little, I guess, industry secret, I guess, to a degree that it's not really a secret. It was just something that I noticed, and it comes true every year that these teams, they've done so much scouting with the big leagues, right? Like they'll scout the main guys first. They usually wait until all these smaller leagues are in the playoffs, and they'll wait to see which kids dominate the playoffs. And then those kids every year, without fail, usually get drafted. So this could be a situation with Macpherson. I don't even know if he was on Central Scouting's watch list or anything like that. But he wasn't on my radar. One thing that you can do is you can look at the college recruit listings and say, okay, but that would take a massive undertaking if you're like just one person covering the draft. So nonetheless, he and his brother, Colin or Connor, I think it's Colin. Connor. Okay, so Connor and Ryan were twin brothers, and they were the top dogs on the team.
Yep.
They both played center. They both played wing. They'd be on the same line together. Sometimes they'd be on the different lines together. But in the postseason, they both went bananas, and they led Leamington to I think it was called the Sutherland Cup. And Ryan led the league in scoring, and Colin O'Connor was second. Now, the difference, though, between the two players is that Colin is the offensive fast.
Connor.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He's the high end skill guy with occasional defensive showing or revealing defensive acumen, whereas Ryan was like the Jonathan Taves. Like he was taking all the big draws, he was doing the top penalty killing, and so his brother did a lot of the puck handling and the creating, and Ryan definitely made it click by scoring a lot. So good size, right? He's about like 6 foot 170. So maybe he's not done growing just yet. He's going to go to Penticton, I think, in the BCHL, right? So that's a high-powered program. If I think Suniev and the Nadeau brothers are still there, you're looking at a heck of a freaking group. Penticton usually has a lot of NHL draft picks. And then from there, he goes to UNH. So when he goes to UNH, that's in Hockey East. What kind of hockey are they playing in Hockey East? It's usually defense, goaltending oriented, low scoring. So he's going to kind of fit right in there. So what you're getting is like a 200-foot, good face-off, penalty killing, but also pretty good offense as well. So could he be like an Owen McLaughlin? We'll see. I wouldn't be shocked if he just obliterates the BCHL, especially if he's playing with his brother. And that kind of like it's what we saw from McLaughlin this year in the USHL. So it's another one of those late round picks that has I think a higher ceiling than some of the kids picked before him. So again, I like the strategy. You're going for the kids who are the best players on their teams. They were the leading scorers in either in the playoffs or the regular season. Again, and I've said this on previous podcasts. Like, it doesn't hurt me that my rivals are drafting the players I want and my team is not. But it definitely makes it a lot easier to understand when the team, let's say, whatever happens with the Flyers or the Devils or other teams that have drafted kids who I like. It's easy to understand like the direction that they're heading in. Like I look at the names that the Flyers have drafted. I'm like, I see what they're trying to do here. I see exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to add skill, but at the same time addressing needs. But if we're going to address needs, we're going to do it with the best players available at those positions. I know that sounds cliche and whatever, but again, like
no, I agree,
this is the
100%.
kind of kid. This is the kid you draft late in round 6 or early in round 6. You know,
they did invite his brother Connor also
to I saw to
camp.
dev camp.
Yeah, and Flair was even saying that they were actually weighing to go through to grab which brother.
They weren't sure after the draft availability.
I would have taken Connor because of the skill level is just a little bit higher.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see why you go for Ryan.
It's probably that floor,
or NHL readiness.
The skill. Well, if he doesn't make it with the skill, maybe he can play a bottom 6 role in the NHL or something like that.
Yeah, because you were saying, Steve, right? Like he's taking all the big draws, playing penalty kills. So like if it doesn't work out with the skill in terms of the high swing, you get that guy that could be like fourth line, third line player for you. And I mean, I think it's interesting, obviously, playing in that league, like Greater Ontario Junior Hockey League. Personally, for being in Ontario, I've not heard of the league, but it's interesting.
Jack Hughes averaged like 5 points. Jack Hughes played there for like a half a year, and he had averaged 5 points a game or something.
That's crazy, right? So it just shows sometimes, like you're saying, the teams, I guess they scout these best players in these leagues, and it seems like a good pick for them. So it'll be interesting to see how he progresses for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. And let's go into our last pick and another, I guess,
right-handed defenseman.
Yeah, another defenseman, but also I believe his father also played in the NHL. Matteo Mann, he is massive. I see here 6'5", but I've also seen him listed at 6'6", 230 pounds.
Yeah, big boy.
Big kid.
A big defenseman from the Q. The Chatumi Sagawin. How do you say it?
Close enough.
Oh my God, I'm so terrible at that. But anyway, from the Q, minus 23 last year. I don't think raw even is a good enough word for this kid, but obviously they took him because he has physical gifts. And they see something in him. So maybe a defensive defenseman of some sort. Steve, what can you tell us about Matteo Mann?
All right, so his dad is Trent Mann, the scouting director he was the scouting director. Now he's the AGM for the Ottawa Senators.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And he's been with the Senators for a while. So I don't know why they opted to play him in the Q, the Sun, in the Q and not the O. But nonetheless, he played for Chicoutimi. They weren't that great. They have a couple of kids on that team that were fun to watch, Loshko and Maxime Massé might be a top 5 or 10 pick next year's draft. So I was never really a big fan of Mann. I didn't rank him in my top 25. I thought that with his size, with his hands and his footwork, that everything should have been married together more consistently. That, if you could move, and he moves okay for his size, I felt like he really should have taken over. And you rarely saw that. So out of all their picks, more so than Sotheran, he is definitely a project. And so, I want to see him not necessarily be like a dirty player, but just have like a meanness or a toughness in him that's going to intimidate a 5'8" Quebec League forward from going to the net or going to the corner with him. So I think that's what hurt his stock. Central Scouting was, I think, fairly high on him. I believe Bob McKenzie was high on him. Is it because of his dad? Who knows? But I think that what hurt him was that he wasn't a, let's say, overtly physical presence on the ice considering his size. He should have been wiping everybody out, and he really wasn't doing that. So he's not a gentle giant. He definitely stands up for himself, but he can be physical and tough. You just don't see it all that often. So now you look at the right side, right? You have Mann, you got Sotheran, you got Bonk. Then you add the Grand's kid. These kids all have size. They're adding beef.
And you got Attard too still. So
yeah, Ronnie out, of course. And so the idea, the strategy, again, I agree with the strategy. I agree with it. If you draft Mann as a contingency for Grands, or you draft him as a contingency for Samson. I think Samson's a righty, right?
Yep.
Okay. Again, it's such a late pick. They already swung for the fences with offense. I couldn't complain with that pick. They, like I said, they drafted the goalies. It's fair to ask, well, why did we draft another right defenseman who's a project, who's big, when we already did that with Sotheran? But again, like, you want to just, it's all about, to me, establishing competition. And one way you can do that is you have your NHL lineup set up strategically over the course of, let's say, 10 years, and your AHL, like, ready reserve, or your practice squad, if you want to call it that, because you need good buys down the AHL level too. So I think I said it on the other podcast where I don't think the teams necessarily like want to hit on NHL players that late. At a minimum, they want them to be in the AHL,
right?
And from there, anything could happen. And you definitely wouldn't you rather have like your own team's draft picks in the AHL than like the 27-year-old like retread who's just so.
Hextall used to say that here when he was the GM. He said, look, if you take a guy and he even plays in the AHL level, he's like, that's a win. He's like, if you're drafting a pro and the guy becomes a pro, that's a win. And I would say, this seems like it reminds me when the Flyers drafted Oliver Lorsden, if you remember him. I think he's from Denmark. He's also very similar defenseman, 6'6", very big. He played a little bit in the NHL, but again, just freakish gift of size. And it's the same thing they did with Ivan Fedotov. He was a complete unknown. He was a 6'7" goalie, and they just took a flyer on him. And
no pun intended.
Yeah, right. All right, so that wraps up our draft. Our draft coverage here. We're going to talk about Cutter Gauthier a little bit. We'll talk about the re-signings that the Flyers just had, and then we'll talk about the new signings, and we'll end it there. So Cutter Gauthier, I just want to bring this up, and then I do want to ask you about your thoughts on Cutter. So there's just been a lot of questions because Cutter is not at dev camp. Just for those who are wondering, though, and this has been broken down to us, it makes a ton of sense. The kid has played a ridiculous amount of hockey of late. He also has to pay for his own travel, which, again, I don't think is the biggest deal in the world, but there's not a huge incentive to get here. He also, in my opinion, is not going to play for the Phantoms. This is not something he desperately needs at dev camp. It would probably help him in some way. It's good to meet the players, to be here around the fans, but this is not a requirement for this kid. This is a kid who's most likely walking on to the NHL next year. We'll probably spend no time in the AHL. So I don't see this as a big deal. I see it actually a little bit of a cocky move, and I kind of like that because I think he's very good. And I think he knows that, and I don't think he's really concerned that he needs the elements of dev camp. I saw him in dev camp the year before that, and he looked clearly a level above everybody else.
Yeah.
I saw the same thing when I saw York come in for his first dev camp also. I just don't see it as a big deal. But I don't know if you want to comment on that at all, Steve, and then just give us Cutter Gauthier obviously had a fantastic tournament. He had a great year in college hockey, and I just want to know, I talked about it earlier about how you draft a guy with a mold, right? And when we grabbed Cutter Gauthier, a lot of people here in Philly said he's not high-end talent. Trust me, I think it's exact. I love that.
Did they watch him? See what that kid was doing with the puck last year?
Right. Well, and that's what I saw as somebody with all the tools of being elite, all of the tools. So I go, as long as the mold works out, I loved what I saw this year. So, Steve, break it down for us.
Well, I will say this about the dev camp thing. So it's not that big of a deal, but you can't just dismiss it. And the only reason why you can't dismiss it is how are his peers going to interpret that, right? So you look at a guy like I know that I think Briere said he's played a lot of hockey, but I don't think he said that was the reason why, because I don't think Gauthier really gave him a reason. Or they didn't admit what the reason was.
It was the financial thing is what they used, which is an NHL rule. And that's what
I know, and I get it.
Said.
I get it.
It's an excuse, probably.
But the only issue I would have with it wouldn't be if I was a fan, and it wouldn't be if I was in the front office. Well, maybe is that are his peers? Because dev camp isn't fun. It's not. They don't go there and have like lunches together and all right, see you in 3 hours.
It's a grind,
Like it's a lot. Like they have to learn like systems, and they have to learn what it's like to be a Flyer and the team history. Some teams that go as far as give them testing. It's not like it's almost like a certification in a way. And oh, by the way, like you might be able to distinguish yourself and make the team. So a lot of these kids, especially when the kids are going there that aren't drafted. They're not property of Flyers property. So you get like a really intense competition. But again, the only thing that I'll have an issue with, is like, you look at a guy like Avon, who played the full season with Peterborough, then 25 games with OHL or and their team was always had the ice tilted. Peterborough was like, the goalie will save us literally every game. That was like the coach. What's your strategy? The goalie. That's our strategy. So
Memorial Cup too, yeah.
Yeah, and then you go to the Memorial Cup. So, but again, I'm just like trying to look at it from like if he's a great guy and everybody loves him, they're like, oh, you lucky bastard, man, you didn't have to go to dev camp. But it's kind of like Ranger School where not everybody gets like road march down to the next phase. In Ranger School, and I'm talking about like Army Ranger School. Yeah. If you're not airborne, if you're not airborne qualified, then you don't do the parachute drop into the next phase. You get on a truck and they drive you and you get to sleep the whole time. And if you heard about Ranger School, like they don't sleep at all for like the 3 months they're there. So it's almost like, yeah, you got to sleep and we had to do the jump. So it's kind of like that thing. But other than that, it's not a big deal. And even if it was financial or he's fought out, he's tired, he's got an injury, he's nursing, not a big deal. And nobody's going to be talking about this in 4 years when he's an NHL top 6 center and, scoring. As far as his play, though, I'm sorry to
no, go ahead.
Cut you off. As far as this guy was playing wing most of his draft year, and he was insanely skilled. Like insanely skilled with his shooting, with his passing, with his stick handling. I ranked him like 6th or 7th. There was no way I was going to move him. So he goes to BC as a freshman. That team did not have a lot of help and support. And he automatically becomes
the best player.
Man
in
he was the man.
BC. Yeah,
he was the man. So like every box has been checked. Kid wants to take off, let him take off. But
I think he knows
buy
that.
the boys a case of freaking beer or something like that. Or I don't know.
Well, and to be honest with you, I think he knows that, and I think that's why he took that. I think after he had the Worlds and he
World Championships playing amongst men, and he scored at the pace that he did. Yeah. I think that and just all the hockey played, it makes sense. And then obviously the NCAA rule there, though his counterpart, Devin Kaplan goes back, for another dev camp who was there last year too, I believe. So I think obviously it shows that, like you guys are saying, probably just he knows that it's something where, hey, if I miss this, it's not really the end of the world type thing, right?
Yeah. And look, I think ideally you'd want to see him there, but I'm just not going to make a big. Everybody's always looking at these NCAA players like they're going to leave the teams that they're with, and I totally understand that, but I don't think that's what we're looking at here. Yeah. And that's why I even saw videos being made of it online, and I was like, okay, you guys are blowing.
It's not even close to that point at this.
First of all, Gauthier should want to be a flyer. They just drafted Michkov. He could be a center, and if that guy's scoring like Ovechkin, he's going to be back. He's going to make $9 million a year. So why would he? Why would he want to play for another team?
100% agree with that. All right, let's go into our next topic, and this is the re-signing stuff. I'll kind of just list the statuses here all at once. Frost deal is imminent, close. We still don't have that. The Ronnie Attard deal is done. He got a two-way contract for 2 years, I believe. Noah Cates is currently filing for arbitration. I think that's a little bit more to scare the Flyers. My guess is they probably just. My guess is the Flyers want to sign him long term and are just not offering him enough.
Yeah. He probably wants Farabee. Didn't Farabee get his like after 1 year or was it 2 years?
I think it was 2 years, but he did
$5 million.
Yeah,
but the production is around the same, right? Like about 40 points. So maybe he's like
and my defensive role.
So. Farabee was on a 25-30 goal pace when he got that contract.
Yeah,
but to your point, and I think this is where Cates, has leverage here. He played at an elite level defensively.
They used him as a first line, second line center all year.
And his analytics say that as well. So if they go down to the numbers, they're not going to want to go to arbitration with him. So I suspect that this deal will get done soon. And then York still unknown and Ali Lickshell still unknown. Steve, I'll just pass it to you. I'll let you just comment on all that. Anything stick out to you there as being an issue? I see all of these being tied up by the beginning of the season. I don't really see
they all had good seasons, whether in the AHL or the NHL. Like they did their job, so you have to reward them. Like Lickshell came over from, I think this was his first season in North America, wasn't it?
Pro year,
yeah. And he would have, if he played the full season Lehigh Valley, he would have hit like 70 points.
Almost a point a game. Point a game. So
so you got to acknowledge that. And this is again a 6th round pick. Okay, here we go again with the Flyers and these forwards in the late, like, copy what the Flyers are doing, everybody else. Like, they seem to have, like, the formula there. York, we still haven't seen the full NHL season out of him. But when he goes down Lehigh Valley, he's their number one or number two, the power play quarterback. When he goes to the Flyers, remember we had that issue where he was sent back ahead before the season started, right? Yep. And he ended up playing about I don't know what he played, like 50 games or something like that, or was it 30 games? A little bit
more.
Yeah. Okay. So
definitely more like 60 to 70% of the season than NHL.
Yeah. So I don't know how much leverage he might have, and of course Cates had a phenomenal year.
Yeah.
And then Attard was with the big bomber down with Lehigh Valley, and I think because he joined the Flyers after college, and he was an AHL rookie, and he hit double digit goals.
Yes.
And he's got the size and he plays the minutes. So you gotta let if the player development and the coaching staff and the front office, when they're assessing these guys, their agents really don't have to say a whole lot. They're like, listen, you're talking about rebuilding in the future and this and that. Like, this is your future right here. Like, these guys did exactly what was asked of them. But how much leverage do they really have because of their age or whatever? The other thing I noticed about all of them except for York is that they're getting up there in age. That UFA, Frost is 24. Yeah. Attard, I think, is going to be like 24 or 25, right? Because he was an overage drafted.
He's 24 also, yeah.
Cates is 25 in this coming season, and Lixill is like 24, 25. So, they're going to have to pay. You have to worry about the UFA situation. But I don't think it would be bad for the Flyers to invest in them with a 2 or 3 year deal. The issue is that all you really got is 1 year to go off, right?
Off a sample, yeah.
Like, so Frost, Cates, and I love Farabee, but Farabee took a little bit of a step back, right?
The injury, yeah.
The injuries, yeah, but still, like he needs to, like he was heading to a place where like, oh my God, he's going to be like, 65, 70, 80 point guy. And then now we have to maybe temper those expectations because he has to get healthy, obviously, but he played the full season last year, or they're close to it. Yeah. So I think maybe that might be like Jones and Briere might be like, all right, listen, take it easy. You guys were great and you're part of our future, but you got to show me a little bit more.
I think to your point, I think Cates is the only one being offered a long-term deal. Even York I think all of them are a show me contract.
Yeah, I think they're trying to get some savings. I mean, with Cates, we talked about this on previous episodes, but specifically with him, I think if you're the Flyers, it would behoove you to try to sign him, a little bit longer.
Give him a Scott Laughton deal.
Yeah, exactly. Give him like $3.5 million. See if you can get him, some of those UFA years bought up, because when you can play defensively like how he can, it's such an asset for you. And he's going to want obviously more money when he gets into those UFA deals. But I think just with all the players you listed, it's probably like you guys were saying, like more show me type deals. The interesting thing I saw with the Attard signing, I mean, 850,000 AAV, so not really too much there, almost like league minimum to be honest. But yeah, the second year that is a one way, so it kind of gives you a little inkling into the sense that hey, Flyers probably expect him to maybe be an NHL player
next year.
Yeah, next year. So it's kind of leaning towards that. It shows like they want to give their young guys chances on defense, right? And you remove Provorov, you're definitely doing that. So,
but I like that. I would prefer they take their time with signing these guys. Even Frost, who had a great second half of the year.
Yeah.
Make him prove it again. And then if he does it again, which I think he probably will, then you pay him, because then you have your guarantee at least that they are trending in that direction.
And plus, we don't know that, like, this could be the beginning, like, from Frost's standpoint. Why? I mean, yeah, I had a great year. Give me the money. But what if this guy has 70, 80 points next season?
Well, you're you're betting on yourself then. And I think that's what
exactly. So, and that's how I think a lot of these players make that mistake, is they want the money like right off the bat. And if it's timed that way because that's when your contract expires, fine. But, like if this kid, let's just say hypothetically that, Frost signs a, 4-year deal for like, 16 million, but then now he's like an 80-point center. He's going to be, he's like, oh shit, and then it's going to be, he's going to be going into UFA because he's going to be UFA age when the contract is wet. So this is going to be a test, a small test for Briere and Jones to see how they handle it. But you really can't go wrong, though. I mean, if you are going to overpay anybody, overpay a kid. You know, a kid that you drafted and developed yourself, and you're already to rebuild anyway. So it's better than go out and give, let's say a 6-year deal to like Trocheck or,
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think we'll see that soon. And I imagine they'll trickle in over the summer, get finalized. All right, so we'll go into our last segment here. I'll just start it off with, we never really mentioned it because it happened in between. So Kevin Hayes was officially traded to the St. Louis Blues for a 6th-round pick and 50% retained on that contract. So over the next 3 years, the Flyers will have to pay 3.67, something like that, in dead cap space. I don't love the trade. I understand the trade. I hate making trades with zero leverage. But I understand why the Flyers had to do this. Well, the only thing I would say is you just limit these type of deals. You don't do them often. You recognize that they're not helping your team as much as at least the fan base is saying. Just a move that needed to happen. And with that came a bunch of new signings. And I'll roll into that. So we signed Garnet Hathaway. I do want to talk about these players: Victor Mete, Mark Stahl, Ryan Poehling, and Rhett Gardner. And Gardner is most likely AHL bound purely there. But Steve, we'll open up to you first on the Kevin Hayes thing, and then I do want to talk about Garnet Hathaway to start.
All right, so the Hayes wasn't a Briere Jones move. He was signed by Fletcher, and I think when you look at the behavior, the rhetoric, the press conferences, like it's almost like when the fans are booing Fletcher at the thing, you kind of like want to rid any trace, right? Not draft pick wise. But like when you deconstruct, when you want to change the direction, you want to erase like everything. Not everything, because remember Tortorella was a Fletcher hire, and he might like year one was a success, all things considered. So like I think maybe that's part of it, but also it has to do more with like flexibility moving forward. So let's just say the Flyers pull like Buffalo, or they pull like a New Jersey. Well, maybe not New Jersey. I mean, that was what the Devils did was bananas. But now the Flyers are now contending for a playoff spot next year by moving on from a guy like Hayes. Like what was Kevin Hayes going to give you? Clearly, like I love Kevin Hayes, but he is not a number one center in the NHL. Like he is a really good number two center on a good team, but he can't carry a team. No matter how skilled he is, no matter how great his puck skills are and his vision and whatever, and his size, like Kevin Hayes, like, listen, Torch gave him the tough love. But again, it was, to me, it was a no-brainer. And that maybe it would have been nice if you could get some of him. But again, Fletcher gave him a pretty lucrative contract. So it was hard to trade. So that's my take on Hayes. I think it's addition by subtraction. And the thing about the Blues, they had like a toxic ass season. Like the Armstrong, the GM at the end of the season presser, his exact words were, I'm paraphrasing. He's more guys cared about getting on YouTube and getting their highlights, having 1 million views than winning. He said that about his own team, okay? And that team had a lot of talent on it. So Hayes has had his work ethic questioned before. So I'm wondering how it could work out. As far as everybody else, these are signings that you make when you're just admitting that you don't want to really do well the following season. None of these guys, like Hathaway, he's never played above the bottom six. Yeah. He's a physical guy. He hits. He's only hit 20 points twice in his career, and he hit like 20 points. So he's just there because he'll be physical, right? Rhett Gardner, same thing. Like he was a mid-round pick. Dallas gave this guy. He was in college. I think he played for like North Dakota. And at the time, it's like, oh, he's going to be the top guy in North Dakota. That guy could not like establish himself as a top player there. So in the AHL and I think in his brief NHL stints, he's been a physical guy, right? Whether he plays center or wing. Poehling is a. Am I jumping ahead? Am I going?
No, you can go ahead. It's fine.
Okay.
Talk about everybody.
Poehling, disappointing. He was a guy that we had as a first-round pick in 2016 or 17. And remember, he had a hat trick in his first NHL game with Montreal. They moved him to Pittsburgh in the Petrie deal, or as part of the Petrie Matheson deal. and he just can't find his way. So big kid, maybe you consider him a two-way type, but he's never played. He's going to be 25 years old. He's never played a full season in the NHL, and he was a first-round pick. Victor Mete, good skater, very small, not physical. Leafs gave him a shot last year. Ottawa gave him a shot. Montreal gave him the biggest shot. That was the last time he played a full season. So he's a depth guy. I don't really know how Torts is going to deal with that. But again, he's a puck mover, smaller guy. He was supposed to provide offense when he got drafted. He never really did. The only good signing Mark Stahl. I mean, even though he's 40, he at worst will be a mentor for the younger guys. So Detroit signed him in, I think, 2021 after their horrible season. But look, the guy just played 20 minutes a night for a Stanley Cup final. So he must
top
be
four, yeah.
He wasn't perfect. As a Ranger fan, I have flashbacks. I saw a lot of Stallisms, and you guys will see it. You'll see it. A lot of own goals, a lot of stuff just hits off him and goes in, and you just accept it. But these are the moves that you make when you clearly don't plan on winning the following season. This is a legit rebuild. You know what I mean? So, I'm sorry if you guys were like, "No, I think Hathaway could be 30 goals."
No, not at all.
That's not going to happen, man.
I'll state mine, then Vasili, I'll let you go. So, my thoughts with Garnet Hathaway, I really like the physicality. If you notice, the Flyers are just adding that. I love these type of players, and the Flyers' bottom six have been pretty shit. And if you're gonna fill the top 9 with kids, I think it's a really good idea to have a guy who's gonna be in the NHL, playing all positions, a little bit better defensively and offensively than Delorier, who's just more physical. I like that. It's a Tortorella guy. I 100%. I see the value, and with a young team, I think it's a right move. Just like you bring in Stahl for the leadership element, you bring in Garnet Hathaway so young guys don't get intimidated. Same way you brought in Delorier. The Victor Mete thing I think is really interesting. He seems like a guy who's rushed into the NHL, undersized defenseman, great skater, and yet played after his draft year immediately in the NHL. Why would they do that? And it looks like it probably stunted his development. But I will say, for being a small guy, he has a lot of NHL time. I don't expect him to play on the Flyers this year, but I do expect him to play a big role for Lehigh Valley and potentially get a call up. We don't have any really fast defensive skaters, so I think that's a nice fit there. I love the Mark Stahl signing. Just I was kind of predicted this, that we are gonna sign a aging kind of big name defender for the name alone. And I think this is kind of a big thing, even though he can still play. But I think the players appreciate the name in the locker room. And then Ryan Poehling, some heroics, right? In his junior championship, he had a hat trick also in a comeback game where I think they won that game. He scored the shootout winner too.
Yep.
I think he's a guy who is a Tortorella. He's going to be a Tortorella project. That's what I see from him. That is Tortorella. This guy should be your guy. He plays the way you like. So can you make him into something? And the Flyers really need a fourth line center. I think he could play that really well. And then Rhett Gardner, I don't expect to play at all with the Flyers. I expect him purely to be AHL bottom 6 role.
He'll be the new Max Willman.
Yep. Who's a UFA this year. Yep, exactly.
LaPerriere was
he's going to love him.
Keep him. And Willman's gone. All right, we got Rhett Gardner. And I'm looking forward to the press conferences where he's like, you know what? I want Forster to play more like Rhett Gardner. Something like that,
Yeah, just put a little more shoulder in him. Forster already got a new jersey number, and then they gave him his old jersey number because Stahl joined. But all indications are Forster is going to make this team out of camp.
Yeah, he should.
I could definitely see
Tortorella
that, sure.
loves him. Vasili, go ahead. You want to add anything to free agency? Then we'll wrap it up.
So for Garnet Hathaway, I mean, I think it's just a fourth line signing, really, right? He's played on the fourth line his whole career. I think last year he had about 16 points, 52 penalty minutes in 59 games. So he's one of those guys that's really using his hitting. I mean, he can play a little bit for you on the penalty kill. Definitely a Tortorella type player, somebody he's going to like. He'll run through a wall for Torts. And he's really there to set an example for some of the young guys. He works hard. You usually want your fourth liners to be very hard workers and kind of set an example for younger players. So it makes sense to get a veteran in like him. And I think even with the 2-year deal, if some younger players surpass him, let's say next season, I think it's a contract you can easily move at a trade deadline and get some assets back. I think for Ryan Poehling, it's definitely interesting with the first round status in the past. I think though that likely the ship has sailed in terms of him being anything more than probably like a fourth line guy at the very best, potentially on the third line maybe, but even that's probably a stretch at this point. But if you look at Tortorella and what he's good at, it's usually getting guys who play in a similar mold to him and getting the most out of him or out of them. So I think Tortorella probably will, that'll, like you said, Yariv, will be his project, kind of do that with Poehling. So it'll be interesting to see if he can kind of get the most out of him. I know he played on the PK for Pittsburgh, so I think the Flyers will probably try to use him there for sure. Stahl's the most interesting one for me, just because they have such a young defense now, with Provorov getting moved and D'Angelo. That deal is set apparently to go down probably July 7th, which is tomorrow, or July 8th. I think the GM of the Hurricanes, Don Waddell, said they had to just wait on the deal because of it potentially being like a
they had to wait the 1 year period. Otherwise, it was tampering or something.
Tampering because they're trading him back to the same team technically, right?
Yeah.
So the Carolina. Yeah, exactly. Collusion. So like you're going to move D'Angelo, so you get even younger. So it makes sense. You want to get a veteran guy in there installed, just to have somebody there for your younger defenseman, like a York, like a Zamula, who they're kind of looking to graduate, like an Attard. So if you're going to have such a young defenseman, having a vet like Stahl will help them kind of, accustom themselves to the NHL and be a mentor for them to lean on.
I could see Stahl playing with Sanheim.
I could.
Somebody who's lost his confidence.
It's almost like a Sanheim-Braun type of pairing. It's very similar. He's like that steady, stay-at-home guy. You know where he's going to be in terms of Stahl. And then obviously Rhett Gardner. I mean, he's going to be just kind of an AHL mainstay there. And then just the last thing that I want to touch on, actually, just a little bit on the Hayes stuff, just to go back. Sure. I think for Kevin Hayes getting traded, it was just writing on the wall. Like you saw Tortorella use a $7 million center as a winger for majority of the season. So it just makes sense. And I think, I asked Briere this with the Hayes trade, like it is the reason to trade him because they're looking to get younger in that position and at forward in general. And essentially he said that with Sean Couturier and Cam Atkinson coming back, that's two roster spots that are already taken up. You keep Hayes, and if you're a rebuilding team looking to get younger, where are those spots for your younger players, right? Yeah. So I think it's just writing on the wall with Hayes, and I think it makes sense to move him just in the direction the Flyers are going in terms of rebuild. And I think you summed it up perfectly, Steve, with like the free agency signings here. These are the moves you make when you're a team that is looking to be drafting in the top 10 again next season.
And to do it without completely falling apart.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that. One more year of bad is good. Then get us Michkov, get us Cutter Gauthier, and whoever the hell we draft in the top 5, because we're probably going to be in that range. Steve, thank you again, man. What do you have coming up that you want to tell people about that they can follow you?
All right, so I'm on Substack, draftanalyst.substack.com, and what I'm doing is I'm recapping every single draft pick, and I'm giving you like a analysis of every pick. So like when people do report cards, they usually release them like right after the draft. I don't like this, I don't like that. But my analysis is usually like a 2-week process where I watch all the interviews before the draft with the GMs and the scouting directors, and then the interviews after the draft. And I try to see, okay, were they true to their word? What mistakes did they make? Why did they say best player available before and then go with need after? So on and so forth. So I'm basically working on my culminating package for the 23 draft, which is the pick-by-pick analysis, the team report cards, and then the podcast to kind of like just talk about it for like an hour or two. So after that, it's going to be bye-bye 2023, hello 2024. If you subscribe to my Substack or you got my draft report, the 2024, my top 32 for next year's draft is there. My top 3 right now is Cole Eiserman 1, Max Celebrini 2, and Demidov, the Russian kid 3. Can't wait to hear about him having character issues in the middle of next season. And then that's it, and then we're going to the World Junior Summer Showcase is in late July. I haven't seen the rosters yet, but after that, Ivan Holinka, and then that's when we start 2024.
Love that. And we're going to bring you back on here to talk about 2024 draft, because we're going to be talking about it probably all year round. And I've actually looked into Demidov, and I just wanted to make sure that his point production wasn't as high as Michkov, and it is not. Even though he looks exceptional also.
He looks really good too, yeah.
From what I understand, he's got more physical tools than Michkov.
He was one of the top. He's like 6'1", 190 or something like that, but he is a deadly playmaker from the wing. He can score goals, but his vision and playmaking. So, Yzerman, known as the finishing guy, Celebrini, brilliant skater, right? You saw like he's a dual threat. He could be a number one center. But Demidov might be he's and listen, he was one of the top scorers in the league, the top scorer on the junior team. Doesn't happen often with a draft -1. So keep an eye on him.
Draft him to go with Michkov, and then you have the two Russians. You have the goal scorer, the playmaker, right?
I'm not gonna lie. When I hear Celebrini's nickname is, I think, Cheetah or something like that.
Yeah.
Typically, those are like my favorite guys, the speedster center. So
yeah, he's the Cheetah. A guy that Carolina drafted was the Gazelle. Jaden Perron was Puma Cat. Matt Coronado, when he was the Bison. So they're play-by-play now, so it gives them all these like animal names.
I love that.
And so if you watch a game, a shift will be like, and Bison hands it over to Tiger. Tiger with a great move. Tiger over to Barrett. Barrett with and you're like, and you wonder like how it comes about. He might just ask them, like, hey, if you're an animal, what would you be? But yeah, so
I love that.
So yeah, Gazelle and Cheetah.
All right, awesome.
Picks.
Thank you again, Steve. This was an awesome episode. We spent like 45 minutes talking about Michkov, so that's exactly what I wanted.
Good.
And I'm not going to stop talking about him at all. Vasili, anything you want to add before we close out here?
No, it was a great show, and thanks again, Steve, for taking the time to come on and break everything down. You always do an amazing job with your draft analysis, and I encourage everybody to check out his draft report and just all the content he has on the Substack. It's awesome stuff.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Likewise, really. I mean, this is you guys and Isaiah, the guys at O&B, it's crazy. I feel like I know more about the Flyers from you guys than about my own team, because it's like focus on the draft and then do Flyer podcasts. And so if you ask me right now, who the Rangers sign in free agency, I can tell you like 2 players. So I'm like, I don't know who else. So I appreciate you guys always have me on. It's definitely my favorite spot to be on, and
Thank you. You're a gem, man. I'm so happy. I stumbled onto your podcast a few years back, and it's been awesome to have you on.
Yeah, likewise, man. Always a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you again, everybody, for listening. Please like, subscribe, share, rate us on Spotify and iTunes. All that stuff, again, is extremely helpful for us. And again, share our stuff out. It's a humongous help. We love you. And remember, always stay gritty.